It is Marcus here with Caitlin today, and what we're going to do is we are going to talk about how to deal with being trapped in your past. I realize a lot of alcoholics and addicts have issues being trapped in their past and dealing with past stuff, and a lot of times we have a lot of issues around things that have happened to us, things that we've done, all kinds of stuff. So today what we're going to do is we are going to talk about what to do if you can't get over or work through or deal with anything that haunts you, whether it was something that was from years ago that someone did to you, or whether it was something a group did to you, or whether it's something that you do to yourself, or something that you did that you feel guilty about. We're going to talk about how to deal with that. So, Caitlin, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for
All
having
right.
me again.
No problem. And for those that don't know Caitlin, she is from Story Speak Enterprises, and you can find her at storyspeak.net, I believe.
That's
And
right.
I have been following Caitlin for quite a while, and I love her stuff. She is energetic. She has a great outlook on life, and she's one of those people that, when people meet me, they're like, "Are you sure you're not 40 yet? Because like, you seem like you've lived a life of like a 60-year-old, and they're like, how'd you do all that things? And we were actually talking earlier, we have a similar past where we were actually both preachers, which is weird. Like, in what world does that cross paths? So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how this works. If you guys have issues dealing with your past, type it in the box, and we're going to kind of go over those and talk about what it looks like to move through it. Because a lot of people, when they meet people like me or people like Caitlin, they look at us and they're like, wow, did everything just always go right in your life? Like, it's like the movie As Good as It Gets. And they're in the car scene. Do you remember that movie, Jack Nicholson?
I never saw it, but I know that movie.
Excellent movie. And so they're in the car and they're talking about their past. And he's like, my dad used to make fun of me and I did this with my mom. And then Jack Nicholson pipes up and he's like, I got hit with a ruler on the hand when I did the piano wrong. And then he's like, the problem isn't that you're mad that you didn't have it good. You're mad, or that you had it bad. You're mad that everyone else had it so good. And he's like, sometimes in life you have these people you meet and it's kind of like they have all these memories of lakes and noodle salad. And, he's talking about all this stuff. And that's kind of what people look at. And we kind of feel like that's how it is. It's like, okay, this person's happy, therefore their life was probably good. Or this person's sad, therefore they had a bad past. But the funny thing about it is you're going to meet people in life where you look at them and you're like, wow, you would never know that happened to them, or you would never know that they went through that. And I find it very interesting because oftentimes that's what gets us stuck, right? The stories we tell ourselves about what happened or what we've done are very difficult. So we got a lot of people on. We got Veronica, Rochelle, Kane, Jason, Baby Jinx. We got, Ivy and Richard and a couple others hopping on as well. So, Caitlin, if you want to go through, I know in your stories, you don't have to go into the detail unless you want to. I'll leave it up to you. I know in the stories you had a lot of things that you dealt with, a lot of things that, the majority of people would get stuck on. They'd be like, my life is stuck. I can't move forward. I can't stop thinking about this. I can't move through it, that kind of thing. So if you want to talk about that, we will go there.
Yeah.
And Ivy says, congrats for the 10,000 subscribers. We're actually really
Congrats.
happy about that. We just hit it yesterday, so
Nice.
pretty cool.
Okay, yeah, thank you for allowing me to go first. I would love to share. So, within the past 2 years, I kind of have had this whole awakening of myself, right? And really getting past these stories and healing my mind and really stepping into an identity that I created and getting out of that role my family put me in, the role out of the role society put myself in. And just like Marcus said, like completely leaving my past. And I think the first thing I want to point out is that I know now our heavens only come from our hells. So and no matter how good someone's life is, they still have their own version of hell. Like, you can't compare hurts or compare lives. Everyone knows their own hurt, and we can't ever compare it. So, yeah. So I grew up in kind of this interesting home where it was like I always felt emotionally unsafe, right? And because as we grow older, what we learn as children, we still attach to that until we learn otherwise, until we learn to basically become not attracted to what is familiar to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was so familiar with the feeling of emotional, not feeling emotionally safe, and pleasing people and confusing approval with love, that I was always putting myself in situations where like I just wanted someone's approval, like where I kind of like sacrificed myself and begged to be corrected and be better. And so when I was 18, I entered a relationship that was abusive, and there's many levels of abuse. Sometimes I hate that word, but um, it was very. I felt like a dog in a lot of ways. um, there were some things that happened that were very traumatic. There was rape that occurred more than once, uh, bruises, um, lots of control and manipulation. And I was in that relationship until I was 24, so 18 to 24. And I was actually engaged to this guy until I had the balls to break it off. And what's funny is I was going to church this whole time, right? And, I was always told, like, when I felt not safe, like, to stay in a situation, that it was my fault I didn't feel safe, that I had to pray through it, that I had to um, keep the faith, a very warped mentality. Granted, I'm sure people didn't know the whole situation. But so, um, fast forward, that ended in 2011. Fast forward to 2016, that was around the time where I really started awakening to love and self-love and finding out the truth about my worth and my value, and that I am loved by God. I don't have to earn love, and understanding love as a gift, and that it's who I am, right? It's like the very nature and components of our being. It's not something we have, it just is, and it's like literally that's what we are made of, right? So that's the identity I started to form. Then in 2016, I as I was in this journey of self-love and exploration, I met another man who essentially turned out to be a con artist, a manipulator. I gave all my money to him. I was completely fearful. I ended up moving with him to pursue a relationship with him, which I thought I knew him before I moved in, and then I realized I didn't know him. I knew the version he was showing me. And so again, this all came back, though, even though I was starting to love myself, my intuition was off, and I never knew to trust myself. So I would have these feelings, um, but I thought it was my trauma. Oh, it was my past. It was my trauma. And I was trapped in my past, right? Again, I thought I was trapped in my past, and I couldn't trust my judgment. I couldn't trust my mind. I couldn't even trust my feelings. So I went ahead, and even though things felt wrong, I proceeded to move in with him. And it slowly became like a thriller nightmare, to be honest. If you've ever seen that movie, The Girl on the Train, like that was my life. Um, he, my mind, because I couldn't trust it, I was very malleable and I could be manipulated. And I was not aligned spiritually at all. So again, I was not so disconnected from myself that he completely like could have his way with me. By the end of that relationship, what happened was I kind of was having a mental breakdown because I realized the truth one day about everything he was lying about. I learned was true, and so all this money, I would give every penny to him. I would catch him in lies, but I still believed him because I like was so a shell of a person, almost like an addict, to be honest, where I was not Caitlin. I would do things that were so out of my character for money and give it to him. I always say I felt like if now I know what it feels like to give your soul away. Like in that relationship, I gave my soul away, 100%. And I had to flee the relationship to a domestic violence shelter when I walked into a hospital shaking and realized he was controlling my mind for like a year and a half. And I was shaking, and I said, listen, I think I may have a mental illness, but I also think that I only think that because I've been told that I'm sick and that I'm bipolar and that I need to get on meds. Like he was controlling me to a T. It was really crazy. Where he had me to the point where I started hating myself again and thinking I was sick and I needed help and I needed pills and all this shit. So thankfully, I got out of that situation, and $50,000 in bankrupt later, I just start completely over. And that's when I was able to really face my past and escape it and use it to invite healing instead of using it as a way to be trapped in patterns and behaviors and relationships.
Yeah, and it's interesting because a lot of times we look at it like you said, our upbringing determines what we get, and not so much like a prophecy that's going to come true, but kind of like we're prone to it. We're looking for it.
Hmm.
And in our minds what happens is we have this thing called categorical reference. And we never really learn anything new. We're always putting things together based on old experiences, right? So we go through and we're like, well, okay, I meet this person and this is the one. This is the perfect person for me. Now, unbeknownst to us, our brain did like a total Terminator thing where it was like, doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo, and it found out, okay, this guy does this, and this is what happens. And therefore, we're attracted to him because that's what's familiar. And it's crazy because it's not like you even think about it. And
Right.
sometimes in relationships, you'll be in them years and you'll feel like, well, this is what I deserve. This is what I get. This is what I'm worth or whatever. A lot of people look at relationships as like a proof of worth. And when we have the abuse, like that story, we look at it and a lot of people have stories like that. And it's terrible. And it should never happen. And sometimes you look at it and you're like, how can someone do that? And that's not for us to figure out.
Right.
It's for us to look at it and be like, well, I'm going to be away from that. I'm going to be apart from that. Now that doesn't mean I'm bad or mean. And you look at Caitlin's story, and I grew up going in the church. I'm not going to say all churches are bad because I've never been to all churches, but some of them are. And I grew up going to churches where I had a person in my life who was totally abusing me as a young child, like for years. And he'd go to church and here's the Bible and here's that and oh hi to the pastor and all this stuff, and it's just a complete and utter facade. And we have to protect ourselves as churchgoers or wherever we want to go. I don't currently go to church, but if you do, protect yourself, and also protect yourself in like AA meetings or if you go to alcohol groups, because oftentimes what happens is you get a lot of people that look at it and they're like, wow, this is a great place to find vulnerable people, right? And it's terrible. It's like, okay, we got to learn to protect ourselves. Now, with Caitlin's story, I want to ask, what was it that clicked? What was it where you finally were like, okay, I look at this different now, or I moved through it, or maybe like for me, I know it was separating. It was like, okay, this guy in my life who did this stuff to me as a kid, no matter what, put a different kid, he would have done the same thing. And I was like, okay, well, it's him, it's not me. And that really helped, as well as I found that when I stopped drinking, or for you, you got out of the situation and you were able to look at it different. Or what was that like for you?
All right, I'll tell you the process because I feel like it's like
Mhm.
three things.
Sure.
One, it's when I was still in a relationship, when I started really thinking for myself and being able to trust myself.
Mhm.
Um, I remember sitting down and I had PTSD, or I was diagnosed with it.
Mhm.
And I remember like I'm just tired. I didn't know what was what. I couldn't tell what was reality, and that was part of the problem. So again, I was still trapped in my past. And I couldn't hear my own voice. I didn't know what was what. So I remember sitting down, and the first thing I knew I had to change was like I had to take control of my mind. So I sat down and I made a list of two columns. At the top of each column, one said fear, the other column on the paper said love. And I remember just sitting there, and that's when I kind of decided I'm going to observe my thoughts, become the observer,
Mhm.
and decide right now which thoughts are fear based and which thoughts are love based. And so then that's where I kind of started separating internally
Mhm.
um, who I am versus who I'm not and who I'm just attaching to from a traumatic experience, right?
Mhm.
And then the next phase, after I started really being able to embody that the difference between love and fear, um, it's like you said, separation for sure. Speaking to that inner child,
Mhm.
um, and then healing, forgiving myself for allowing myself to put myself in this position and being for myself what I never received in childhood, right? Like embodying, uh, yeah, being enough for myself what I never received as a child, yeah. And then the last thing, most recently, this year, this just happened. So the final thing that really freed me completely from the past.
Mhm.
And by the way, our cells are made up of energy, right? Like all we are is energy. So you have to remember that any trauma that is trapped in your body, you are literally holding those vibrations, and it's a part of you. But they don't have to be a part of you forever. You can release them, and you can change the lower vibrations to higher vibrations, and your cell becomes like a lighter body. Like your body can become lighter because you're not holding trauma. So this year I had learned the importance of revisiting, not only to speak to myself, my inner child, but what no one ever really talks about is speak, invite yourself to sit where the universe or where God sits in that moment and to see the dark as it truly was. Because what I saw, what happened, like being, experiencing rape and experiencing that manipulation, to me, I was seeing it from my human perspective, right? Like, oh, this happened to me, victim, 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 this happened to me, this happened to me. In the moment, I could say, you know what? I'm ready to surrender this experience and these feelings, and I want to know what really happened. So I embraced this, and this is really extreme for people, but it's what helped me. When I was able to go back in my memory, experience what I was, where I was, like at the time of the most traumatic things happening to me, and choosing to feel and accept all the good that came with it. Like if all these things hadn't happened, I wouldn't ever be able to experience forgiveness, love, or grace in such a way that I do now. And so the truth was, now this is where it's going to get a little deeper, Marcus, but it's so important to realize who we are first before going through your memories, because I know, like, I am an abundant being. Nothing can be taken away from me. Things are only added to me. So I kind of like took myself off that human level and was like, okay, I'm an abundant being. So what really, if that is the truth, then when I experienced this rape, nothing can be taken away from me. So what was added to me? Grace, faith, love, like forgiveness. And honestly, I basically chose to cut off these pieces of me that I've always attached to and identified with. And where I used to be so survivor mentality and I'm going to bring awareness to this, like that was all ego. And I kind of surrendered to spirit. And literally, I just said the words, like, people are like, how do you surrender to spirit? I literally just said, like, yo, I surrendered this experience. I don't want to feel these things anymore. I don't want my mind to go to the back to these things anymore. So I had to choose a different perspective. And the only thing I could embrace was the truth that I am an abundant being, I am love, and things are only added to me. So when I was able to kind of sit, I call this above duality, where God sits, if you will, and kind of learn to see pleasure and pain as the same. That immediately eradicates like fucking negative emotions and it makes you see things from like a higher perspective. And I'm like, oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that, you know? And so, yeah, that's what helps me. But it's a process. But if you can sit there and really be that humble enough to realize that nothing happens to us, like everything happens for us.
Yeah.
And who we are now, like I'm all about being present too. That's a huge thing. I kind of chose to like literally forget. I literally chose to forget that experience, as if it never happened to me, because I'm like such a new creation from that point. I can honestly say I don't harbor trauma from that. I don't harbor resentment or ill will. And it's like I'm a new being, and it's because I know how to like get rid of those negative vibrations.
Yeah.
So that's very long-winded, but yeah.
No, that was great. And I think it's interesting to look at, you know, the process of what happened, because for me, it was like I had all this stuff and I used to look at it as this happened to me. And what happened was I started to change my life philosophy. And I was like, okay, what is it that I believe about things? I believe, okay, this happened to me. This is bad. And we are not by any means negating or making okay what people do. Like, there's hideous people that do shitty things, and I believe that they should, you know, stand trial or whatever it is that the society has deemed okay for them. But for us to be okay, like for me to look at it, I had to look at life, and this is truly my life philosophy, is that I deserve what the least person on earth got. So, like, if you pick someone who's, like, abused and lives in India and has no shoes and is scrounging for metal because he can't eat and you could trade metal for food over there, that's what I deserve. Because if I can't choose my base level, where I'm born, the situation I'm in, if I can't choose that, then I don't really deserve anything, right? And when I look at that, I'm like, okay, well, now I'm free. Now I could go get whatever I want. I could do whatever I want, because it's like, hey, we're all equal. And really, it comes down to the whole, yeah, you're really special, just like 8 billion other people. And it's interesting because we look at that and we're like, okay, this helps us move through things. This helped me look at a perspective of, wow, that person's going to do what they're going to do to people, regardless of whether it's me. That's just what that person does. Shitty people do shitty things. Wow, what a surprise, right? And we got to look at that and really focus. And for me, I had to let go of all the things attached, because when we go through life, we have an emotion or we have a feeling, right? And we're like, here's our emotion and here's our feeling. And it might be like sad or whatever. And I'm like, this happened to me. And what happens is we attach meaning and we attach a story to it. So we're like, okay, this is sad. And this is one of the things that I kind of have a beef with in some people in recovery groups. Like, some people in recovery groups will say, well, look for your part in it. And I get what they mean, but I also get the way it's taken. Like when you say, cutting parts off, we have to look at what you mean versus what you say. Some people could take that as, wow, she actually literally chopped part. No, we're talking metaphorically. Disclaimer, don't do that. And what they're saying is like, hey, look for your part. What was my part? Maybe my part was born in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was my part in it. That's the end of it. But we look at it and we're like, okay, well, it's easy for people like Caitlin or myself to be like, well, that's because I am worthless. Okay? And we use this word because we can't explain it. Like, it's really hard. Like, for me, I can't wrap my head around there's a guy that existed in history that was Hitler. I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. I'm like, how could someone be like that? And so what happens is people start to go, well, that's because of this, or that's because he's, he was abused, or his shoes were too tight, or whatever. And we try to explain everything. Mm-hmm. And the worst place I think we can be in life is the place where we think we have an answer for why people are the way they are. I don't know why that person in my life did what they did. I don't know. I don't know how they could do that and go to church and be like, I'm a godly man and whatever. I don't get it. But it's also not for me to get. It's not for me to understand. And it's not for me to say, well, I was a little guy. I was easy to pick on. I was this. Or sometimes I was mouthy, right? And it's like, well, sometimes kids are mouthy. If you've ever had kids, they're mouthy, right? That's what they do. And when I separated, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. No. This guy is a dick to everyone. Therefore, I'm just going to take the because out, because that doesn't matter, right? And we have to look at it like how Caitlin found. She found value in the fact that she exists, right? And that's powerful. It's like some people will look at it and be like, well, Caitlin's powerful. She's telling her story. She does things on Facebook. She's helping people out. That's her value. No. I mean, that's great. Like, I love her for that. I'm like, that's cool. But that's not what makes value. The value is in the fact that you're here. The value is in the fact that you are a person, you are alive today, and that's enough. And when you get to that point where you're like, God or whatever made me, therefore that's enough. Yeah. And it's enough to where it's like, God also made terrible people. I don't know why. I don't know why, right? Who knows? Maybe we'll get there and they'll be like, well, Marcus, you were pretty terrible too. And I'll be like, oh, shit, I tried, But God makes these people, or whatever makes these people, and we have to look at it and say, this is just the ebb and flow of what's going on. I remember years ago, my dad is a businessman, and he's very proud of his business stuff. He's a realtor. And he was talking to a buddy of mine, and this dude was from, like, Arkansas, I think he got through, like, the 5th grade or whatever. And my dad was trying to explain to him, hey, businessmen make the world go round. And he's like, son, it's people like me who make the world go round. And this Arkansas dude, barely educated, is like, yeah? Well, why don't you make it stop? And I was like, wow, okay. So the world's going to keep turning no matter what we do, no matter what we think, no matter what we feel. It's going to keep going on. Now, we can look at life and we can start to do like we said with categorical reference, because what we're going to do is we're going to overprotect, right? Like, naturally, Caitlin's going to be like, okay, next dude who comes along, bro, we're going to sit here on trial before I even think about going on a date with you or whatever, right? She's got to put him on trial. And that's good to an extent. But we also have to be like, okay, what are the things that we learned from it? Okay, what did we learn? She's like, okay, well, I learned if a guy asks for your credit card on the first date, yeah, probably not a good idea to give it to him or whatever it is. And then we have to look at what to let go of. Because now I'm 39. I do have gray hairs, like 4 of them. I no longer need the things that protected me as a kid. Like, I don't need them. That abuser's not around anymore. I can look at it and say, I can get close to people. I can love people. I can be me, right? And that's really what I found that sobriety and my change of mindset, because it wasn't just sobriety. Like in the alcohol book, I think they talk about like this 4th dimension of living or whatever. And he's talking about like, it's not just about not drinking, right? It's about a new life. It's about looking at it and saying, this is who I want to be. And I found that sobriety kind of took me back to the person I was before I was abused. Because like I look back and I'm like, hey, 8-year-old Marcus was pretty cool. You know, he always wanted to have fun. He didn't care. He was like, you know, I remember one year on my birthday, I was like, I want everyone to have fun, so let's buy everyone presents and let's play with them. You know, and that's what I did with my birthday. And I was like, hey, that's cool. I like that. And then along the way, I was like, well, you can't do that because it's not rational. And, you know, and now I look at it and I'm like, why the fuck not? Why not? You know, what's the rule in that? But it kind of gave me that person back that was like, hey, I can do this. I can live in the world the way I want. I could live out of love, because I think we're actually only born with 2 fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. Everything else is learned along the way. So if you're like, I fear people with big beards or whatever, right? Or people with, you know, whatever it is. Okay, tall people, skinny people, whatever your fear is, that's all learned. I fear speaking in front of public. That's all learned. Like when you were a kid, they'd put you in front of like 5,000 people and you'd be like, yeah, I got my pacifier, whatever, I'm good. You wouldn't even care. You don't sit there thinking, well, I wonder if he thinks my pacifier is not big enough. I wonder if he doesn't like blue. I wonder if my cry is too loud. You don't think that, right? And so you look at that and it's like every fear that we had learns, right? We learned it. We were programmed that way. And we have to look at it like our life was programmed. And up until this point, up until the point you realize, wow, I was programmed. Wow, this was put on me by church, by society, by the way people treated me, by the way my dad or my mom or whoever talked to me, right? And we look at that and we're like, wow, that was all programming. And at a young age, you were probably this person that was like full of love and full of energy and happy. Okay, yeah. Might have been, you know, had too many sodas and ran amok, but still, you're pretty happy and pretty loving. And we got to look at that and say, how do I return back to that? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. It makes sense to everyone? Type your comments in the box. I know we got a lot of things here. Baby Jinx says, my covert narcissistic mother, who is ultra-religious, was very hard to grow up with. I got away. In her eyes, I turned away from God and family. 5 years later, I was having addiction problems, so she took my kids. That can be a tough thing. I mean, that's what happened to me. Like, when I used to be a preacher, I used to be a street preacher, and I was involved with this group, and I met my girlfriend, and all these rumors went around about what me and my girlfriend were doing. None of them were true until they kicked me out of church, and I was like, well, now I have to live with her because I used to live with church guys, you know? And so my family, they always looked up to me for Bible answers, and then when I left the church, they were like, you left us. You turned your back on God. And I'm like, no, I turned my back on an idea of what you thought God was. That's what it is. Because really, faith is about something we don't really know. Like, I don't know if God has a beard. I don't know if he sits on a cloud. I don't know if he reads the Bible. You know, the Bible's only been around since I think it became the form it is now for like 400 years. Right? So it's like, really, we're looking at this as everything, and it's only been around 400 years. Before that, didn't really exist the way it does today. So we have to look at that, and we have to say, all of these things are ideas. And it's funny because I talk to people, and I look at things. And even my dad, he was here, I hadn't seen him at my house for like 5 years or something like that. He came over, and even now I can realize, because he had a cancer incident where he was like, you might die. And it started to change things. And now he's not as argumentative. He's not as like, this is my idea and it's the only way. Right. And I find that that's a good way to be. That's a good place to be. Like, hey, I don't know. You know, like you get in political arguments and it's like, I don't know. I've never ran a country. I have no idea. I mean, I got some little ideas, but I don't know if they're right. But this is my idea. Let's share it. And that's a tangent. But anyway, that's what we got to look at. Sure.
Can I interject? So everything you're talking about these news stories and removing blame, the simplest solution is to remove judgment from your mind. Is to stop judging. So when you realize, whenever we call something good, bad, evil, beautiful, ugly, that's a judgment.
Yeah.
So when we remove judgment, that's when we finally can have peace and like breathe. Because like it is what it is. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter why it happened. Like, the one quote that stuck with me when I was first starting to like get really harness control of my mind and freeing myself from the past was, forgive them for they know not what they do. And it's like Marcus said, we are all under a program. So it's like, what keeps you stuck in your head is you try to process things and process and process. And even therapists want you to process and process. But the processing has to die. Like there comes a point where you have to stop processing and be like, you know what? It is what it is. It's over. Do I want to keep living in the past and be a victim, or do I want to create a new life and really be who I was created to be, not who this program wants me to be?
Absolutely. And I think it's important, too, to remember that letting go of being a victim of the past doesn't make it right. Like a lot of people feel like, well, if I let it go, he's going to go live his life and he doesn't pay anything. But I mean, he's living his life. He doesn't pay anything anyway. Right. So we look at that and we're like, okay, well, can I hold these two things in our mind? Because society's like, you really can't hold in your mind that this guy's abusive and everything's okay now. Right. It's very difficult. And we have to look at it and be like, well, it doesn't make it okay. It just makes me live differently.
Yeah.
Right. And go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah. The one thing when you say that, so we have to remember too, when we harbor resentment and forgiveness, like you had mentioned unity earlier, like we're all part of each other. We're all one. So whenever I hurt someone, whenever someone hurts me, they're hurting themselves and I'm hurting myself. So when you don't forgive, when you harbor these things, you're literally taking a knife and stabbing yourself. So it's not
emotionally.
about it's not about moral thing. It's like that's reality. Like we are all connected. So I totally jive with Hinduism, right? Because it talks about connection. We're all connected, and we're all purity is like being above duality, above judgment, and so I just wanted to share that. I think it's really important because when you don't forgive or when you let things go, it's not as if you're doing other people a favor. It's like, no, you're literally freeing yourself. Like the reason I can smile and be so free, and like literally I restructured my DNA cells, just as the food we eat, like our cells become that food. Whatever we consume spiritually and energetically, our cells become that. So like I am literally lighter and I am joyous because I am love, like, and we are of love, but you can also be love, made from love, but not activate love, not live in love. So when you forgive and let go, you're literally activating the DNA that you came into before the world, which is love. And that's when miracles happen.
Exactly. And it's interesting, too, because it's like, we have all these things that we hold on to, and we have all these ideas and these thoughts and stuff that we're clinging to. And it's like, to what end? To what end? Yes. Like, why am I holding on to this? What is this doing for me? What is it? And we have to look at it like, have you ever been water skiing?
No.
Okay. When you're water skiing, there's a part where you're like behind the boat and there's all like the water from the boat that's really like stiff and easy to be on. Right. And then when you're on the ski and you go over the wake from the boat, you kind of like lose your balance and you're disoriented and you're like free. And it's a really cool feeling, but it's scary because you're like, wow, I don't have the protection of like the hard water that the boat creates. And now I'm like, whoa, I'm free. And that's kind of what it's like because when I let go of this, what's going to happen? When I move through this, what's going to happen? And what we have to do is we have to be okay with the uncertainty.
Yeah.
We have to be okay with it. And I love Hindu texts as well. I'd like to learn Sanskrit at some point in my life,
Yes.
but it looks really difficult, and I'm not that wise. But yeah, so we got to look at that. Let's take some of these questions. I know we got a lot of people in here.
Okay.
For Baby Jinx, I would say the best thing to do would be to work really hard every day on your sobriety and get your kids back. Because if that's the issue, you probably can get clean, prove to them, hey, this is what's going on, and get your kids back. That would be my advice. If you're here in the States, they usually are okay with that, but obviously get a lawyer or whatnot. But focus on sobriety, because if you don't have sobriety, you don't have your mind. It's like sobriety and alcoholism. So if you're in a drunk state, or maybe like Caitlin, where you're under an oppressive person, right? Mm-hmm. Once you're in that, you can't see your way out, because what happens is it puts you at base level, right? Like just the other night, my wife was gone in San Francisco. She came home, and she starts yelling about how I didn't clean the house up to her expectations. And she comes in and she just, boom, just going at it. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. And what happens in that situation is instantly it hits my ego. And I'm like, wait a minute, wait a minute. You know, I was working, I was doing this, I was doing that. You know, you have no right. And it puts me in the state of fight or flight. Like, hey, let's fight this out and everything. Same thing with alcoholism. It puts you at your base level. That's why people do crazy stuff. It's like, well, I drink alcohol, and therefore I feel lusty, so I got to go find someone to fulfill my lust. Or I feel angry, so I got to fight that dude in the bar, or whatever it is. You know, when someone has a differing opinion when you're drunk, it usually ends in a fight. I mean, because you're like, I got to protect this. And what happens is it's kind of like, I think it was Maslow. Abraham Maslow had this hierarchy of needs, right? And he's like, down here, we have like food and shelter, right? And then up here, we're like, you know, maybe I have like entertainment. I have the need to be entertained. And then up here, he has what you call self-actualization, where it's like, okay, up here is like the spiritual stuff, right? Like feeling this way. And it's interesting because you look at it in life, like you take people like the tragedy that's going on in Venezuela. You take people who are starving and have nothing to eat, and they're down on this rung. They're not sitting there thinking, how do I love my neighbor? How do I do this? How do I do that? They're like, how do I get food? I don't care if I have to steal, even if it's against my ethics. I'm going to go do it. I'm going to do the most terrible things, right? And what happens is being an alcoholic, or being in a drunk state, or being under an oppressive kind of thing, or being under the same mindset puts you down here, and you're thinking about my ego. You're thinking about, what can I get? How am I going to be hurt? How am I going to be offended? But what happens is when you transcend duality, you're going to look at it and be like, well, now I can look at this. And I look at it 5 years ago when I was drinking. My wife would have came home and yelled about things, and I would have been drinking more, and I would have been fighting, and I would have been butthurt about everything, and it would have been a yelling match. And last time that happened, I broke my hand. Not fun. Because I was in that. But I noticed this. I was like, you know, I did what I did, and the house wasn't thrashed by any means. The standard was just a little too high. And I'm like, you know what? I did what I did. And I said, how long do you need to yell at me about this for you to be okay? Because I'll sit here and listen to it. However long you need.
It's very generous of you.
I didn't, yeah, I was like, if you want to yell at me all night, we can do that. I'll listen to it. Doesn't mean I'm going to accept it, but I'll listen to it. And finally and I was like, okay, I'm going to go sit outside. And I was listening to a talk, and it instantly put me back up here. And I came back in. I'm like, you know, what do you want me to do? Hire a maid? We'll get everything spick and span, whatever you want. And so if that makes sense to anyone, I don't know. It makes sense in my mind somehow, some way. But I think it has to do with going up a level. Okay, let's see a couple others. Kane says, I've tried mindfulness, living in the present, find it to be boring sometimes. Sometimes I like to reminisce about the bad stuff people have done to me for some weird reason. Kane, you're probably bored. And I find that a lot of people in sobriety get really bored with life because in our minds as an alcoholic, we over-dramatize everything, right? It's not like a guy told me to scoot over at the bar, it's the whole bar was against me. They didn't even want me there, right? That's the kind of thing we live in, and we live in this fantasy world. I find that now I'm hardly ever bored because I learned for the first time in my life that I can sit with myself without talking, without listening, without having anything, and just be okay. Be like, hey, I could sit out there. I could have the sun shining on me or the rain if it's a rainy day. And everything's okay. Because the funny thing about it is no matter where you're at in your life, with the exception of, like getting an abusive relationship, if you're still being abused, obviously get out of that. But no matter where you're at, most people are pretty much okay right now. Like right now, if you sit and you're like, well, I got bills to pay, I got this, I got that, this guy was a dick, this person said that. But if you sit, you're like, actually right now, apart from my thoughts about what's not going on right now, I'm actually okay. Because a lot of what we do is our thoughts. Like I'll guarantee, or I won't guarantee, I'll bet that most people spend more time, and I know this is true of me, I spent more time wallowing about what was done to me than the actual thing that happened. Right? So like, let's say someone comes up to me, they beat me. Like, okay, there was one example. I was in junior high, and I was short, still short, and I was a magnet to be picked on. Like, that was the thing. My wife, she's like, I went to school, and no one picked on the short guys. I'm like, why couldn't I go to that damn school, But I went to school, and I remember one time I was in 7th grade, and this guy just comes up and kicks me in the guy spot as hard as he can. And I spent years thinking about that, even though the pain is gone, even though the stuff was gone, because I was like, okay, well, that's my story. That's what I had. This happened to me. And I told myself stories. Like, we went to the office, and they were like, whatever, we can't do anything. And I'm like, really? Can't do anything? But at any rate, that's another topic. But we have to look at that and be like, I spent so much time thinking about that instead of just being like, okay, that happened, next.
Can I interject?
You know what I mean? Of course.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
Yeah, I won't. I'll stop saying can I. I'll just interject. Kane, one of my friends always tells me, first of all, his mind's sounds like a lot like yours, except he's in the positive extreme where he literally views his life like a movie. So, so we'll sit there, and how he talks is like, oh, I'm gonna do this, and this is gonna happen. Like, he writes his life like a movie script, and it happens. Not all the time, just as he says, but he entertains himself with positive optimism, because literally our thoughts are that powerful. So if you can understand the power of your thoughts and how the energy that you send out has a ripple effect for everything. And so I'd really encourage you to really become more intentional and deliberate with your thoughts, and not just let it wander off into memories or daydream into what you want to happen, but or what you want to remember, or being a victim. But if you can learn to occupy your mind, and my friend says, employ your demons, like put them to work, like focus on good things happening to you, focus on the future. This is called visualization, and it really works. So start becoming more intentional about what you want from yourself, about what you can do, and start visualizing good things for your future. And test yourself, test it in your mind, exercise it. But kind of sounds like Marcus said, you're bored, and it's really important not to have a lazy mind. So I just wanted to encourage you in that.
I think also one of the things that's very interesting in Hindu culture versus Western culture. In Western culture, for those like our Western culture, America, the way it is now, and most Western cultures have adopted this, it was built by marketers, which I hate to say because my other business, I'm a marketer. And it's funny because you look at it, what's the essence of marketing? Creating desire. What did Buddha say was the root of suffering? Desire. So we're looking at it and we're like, okay, our whole culture is built on making us unhappy, bored, and miserable. When it's like, okay, you look at other people in other cultures, and like Hindu cultures, they just like walk around the street and they're like, what's up, man? Let's go pet a cow because he's God or part of God or whatever. But in Hindu culture, they actually look at it. So here in our way of thinking, right? We look at it this way, and we're like, here's Marcus or whoever, right? And here we are, and we're like, this is the future. I should have drew me more over there. And then our past is all this stuff, right? And we're carrying around our past on this big backpack. And I don't know if you were a kid with backpacks, but when I was a kid, we had to carry every single book, and those things were heavy, especially when you're 5 feet tall and you're like, whoa, wait a minute. And so you have all your past here and you have your future here. Now, in Hindu culture, it's interesting because they look at it like this, right? You're sitting in this chair. There you go. Fancy artwork, right? You're sitting in this chair, and they're looking at it as everything is going this way, right? So here's what's coming at you. So this is the future, and the past is descending in front of you, right? So it's almost like you're in one of those old station wagons where you're sitting in the back, and if anyone's ever been in those, you get sick. But you're looking at everything go past, which is interesting because then you're like, well, hey, all this stuff that happened, it's just going away. It's going away because I'm moving backward and everything's just going away rather than, well, I got all this shit from my past. I'm going to carry it around to my future. I'm walking towards. Does that make sense to everyone where it's like the difference is the way you look at it? And when Caitlin says, change the way you think, right? And we look at that, and these are one of the things, like in church. I remember years ago I was in church, and they were like, well, what you got to do is you got to find the presence of God. And I sat there. I was at this men's retreat, and I'm sitting in my seat, and I'm like, all right, where's this presence of God thing? When am I going to know it's
like
here?
Easter egg hunt. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I'm like sitting there, and I'm like, wait, is that it? I feel this way. Maybe that's it. And so I'm looking for this thing. It's one of those things in life where changing your thoughts is one of those things that sounds really good on paper, but hardly anyone will actually explain what that means. What that means is that instead of fighting with your thoughts, because your thoughts, like we said, are made up of all the things that happen to you in your life, all of your experiences. So you're sitting here and you got all this stuff, right? Here's you, and you got all this stuff. And maybe you're sad about that stuff, right? There you go. You're sad, or you got a weird face, whatever, right? And you're like, okay, well, this is here, this is here, this is here. And all the new stuff that comes in, you're going to be like, well, that guy reminds me of this guy. This reminds me of that. And you're looking at it, and it's all pinging off of all this stuff. And we look at it as we are a victim of our thoughts. I can't stop thinking about this. Well, yeah, if you keep thinking about not thinking about it, you're going to think about it, right? So we got to look at it, and we got to say, well, what if our thoughts were like a river? And we got this river, right? And here's our thoughts. Now, in that river of thoughts, these things are going to be in there, right? I'll be like, wow, that dude reminds me of the person who was mean to me. This reminds me of the time I, got in a fight. This reminds me of the guy who kicked me when I was in school. This reminds me of this. Now, I can look at that, and I guarantee you, because I'm talking about the guy who kicked me, it'll start coming up more in my thoughts, right? Because it's bringing to awareness. So all this stuff is in the river. It's in our awareness, right? And it's subconscious, and it's going through, and it's like all these things happened. And now if we sit up here and we say, well, here I am in my river chair, right? And you're looking at all this stuff go on, and you look at this, and you're like, well, I can have that thought. It can cross my mind, right? Sometimes, and this is in my book that's coming out, which you guys have some of the letters from, where we're like, sometimes you'll be sitting there, and you're like, I wonder what would happen if I kicked that cane out from that old lady. Now, I used to think things like that, and I'd be like, bad, Marcus, you're an asshole. Why would you ever think that? Well, it's chemical impulses. I saw that, and my brain probably went, well, you could do this, that could happen, but it's not going to, right? Your brain is constantly, like if you look at all the stimulus that's coming into your brain at every second, your brain is constantly like, okay, there's a cane, there's this, she could trip, this could happen. Your brain is probably like, what's going to happen if that happens? Maybe I'll go catch her, right? That's probably what it's computing somehow, but you only picked up, kicked the thing over, she's going to fall, I'm an asshole, right?
And it goes back to judgment, by the way. That all
Exactly.
goes back to judgment, where if you weren't judging in the first place, half those thoughts wouldn't exist. It's crazy.
Exactly. And we look at it and we're like, thoughts are just thoughts. Like people who think about drinking. You were an alcoholic. You drank, I drank probably, I don't know, gallons of alcohol.
You are not your
naturally, yeah, and naturally my brain's going to think about that. It's like, doesn't mean I'm that, doesn't
Right.
mean I'm bad, doesn't mean something's going to happen. It just means, hey, this is what's going on. So naturally it's going to happen. Like if like anyone who's ever went to buy a car, right? And you're like, I'm going to buy a red car. All of a sudden, you start seeing red cars everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, did everyone in the red car be like, hey, Marcus wants to buy a red car? Let's all drive on the highway. No. Is there more red cars? No. You just notice them, which is interesting. Okay, let's
I have a
take a
suggestion too, by the way, for
Sure.
anyone who loves what we're talking about right now, like it jives with them. Look up the Bhagavad Gita, the Indian book, the Hindu book, the Bhagavad Gita. It's a beautiful story, and it talks all about judgment, fear, and desire, and letting it go.
I think I have it around here somewhere. Well, I don't, but it's inside somewhere. But yeah, that's actually a good one. There is a very good YouTube dramatic version that I've listened to. It's awesome. This is really cool. So yeah, definitely check that out. Let's see what else. Know how to parent me emotionally. So how do I start healing myself? Well, I think the key to, she says she's been sober a while and feel like her mental and emotional issues have gone even deeper since I quit using. Well, what happens is when you don't use, you lost your coping mechanism, right? So what was happening was it wasn't that they got worse. It's just that you can't numb them. Like if you stop taking Advil, your head's probably going to hurt more. Basic stuff, right? Like if I've had back pain lately. It sucks. But I can take some kind of thing for my back pain. And then all of a sudden, if I don't have it for a day, I'm used to having that coping mechanism. So now when it's gone, those are more. Now, what I would do in that is I would focus on loving yourself, because love is when you feel. Focus on saying, hey, you know what? I got these things that are going on. I got this pain, and sit with it, because I guarantee if you sit with it and you don't fight it, it's going to go away, right? Because so much in this culture specifically, we are the medicine culture. Like you turn on the TV, it's like, hey, do your feet stink? Take this. Does your head hurt? Take this. Is your hair too gray? Take this. And we want an instant remedy for everything. But what they've learned in other cultures is, hey, if you just sit with it, you're going to be okay. Like if I have a migraine starting and I sit there and I go, damn it, I'm going to get a migraine. Shit, this is going to hurt. Fucking migraine. I got work to do. This is terrible. Then it gets big. And I'm already starting to get a headache just thinking that, right? See how powerful it is? Probably from the cigar, but at any rate. We got to look at that and we got to be like, okay, what if I just sit with it? Because my feelings won't kill me, but drinking and doing things to shut them off probably will.
Yeah, and I just want to make a point. Marcus, by the way, I have to go in like a minute because I have a call
Yep.
at night. But
Yep.
those who usually, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but it seems like when we cope with drugs or alcohol, it's because we're what people label as empaths, where we feel everything so much. So I know for me personally, like when the drugs and alcohol are gone, the next step is to put up walls and to numb yourself, to not face it or distract yourself. And so you have to learn with being okay with feeling. And again, so it's, if you can get to the point that realize existing is enough and pleasure and pain are the same, like pleasure and pain are the same. Like I called my friend the other night and I was like feeling really depressed and crying. And he's like, oh, enjoy that. That never happens. Just, I'm gonna let you go enjoy that. He picks up the phone and I'm there crying, just feeling it. And I feel it. And then it passes. And I'm like, yeah. You know, we have to be okay with not feeling okay. And that's totally a Western thing, that you have been programmed to believe that if you don't feel okay all the time, if you don't feel happy, that there's something wrong with you. And that's a lie. So I want you to know that the truth is, when you feel things deeply, nothing's wrong with you. It's that you're letting your body process things, and you're actually facing yourself so you can leave that program. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Caitlin has to step out, so I'm going to switch to full screen. I apologize that you have to look at me large. But I will be here, everyone. Thank Caitlin for showing up. She did great, and we'll definitely have her back. I always love our talks and appreciate it, so thanks for being here.
Me too. Bye, Marcus.
Bye. All right, so I'll take a couple of other questions as we go through. Let's see what we got. I know we got a lot of questions. I got about 15 minutes, so we'll take it from there. You guys can find Caitlin. She's got storyspeak.net if you guys ever want to connect with her. She's all over Facebook, too. She's got a bunch of stuff there. So let's take a couple others. Okay, drinking doesn't even feel good after being sober. You begin to see that. Yes, it doesn't. Like, dealing with life sober is so much better. I mean, it's night and day. And you actually allow yourself the time to heal, right? You can actually heal, which is good. Okay, let's see here. Not even sure what's my problems. That makes me unable to live in the here and now. My doctor said I might have ADD or ADHD. I'm pretty sure I also have OCD. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think everyone with alcoholism has OCD because the nature of alcoholism is obsession of the mind, compulsion of the body to drink. ADHD, sit with it. Just be like, whatever. I know I get anxiety in certain situations, and I know, like, I'm antsy and I move around. I'm like, whatever, that's just what I do. I would also watch what else you put into your body. I switched to decaf coffee a couple years ago. Game changer. I know Megan also switched to decaf. She was struggling to stay sober. Switched to decaf. She found it easier. So, I mean, I don't know. It seems to help us. So you got to check that out as well. But again, I would look at that and be like, okay, I got bullied. I got this stuff. What am I going to do now? What am I going to do now? Am I going to drink? Am I going to dwell on it? Or am I going to be like, hey, yeah, that was sad. Maybe I need to grieve that, right? It's kind of like grieving the loss of a loved one. It's like, okay, they were here. I grieved that. I'm sad, but I'm okay, right? I could be sad and okay. I could be angry and okay. I don't have to embody them, so to speak. Okay, Alex is 48 hours sober. Awesome. We got THC says I was short, dark, and skinny. I was bullied all my life up to the age of 25. I told myself I'd rather get knocked out than be stepped on. Well, I just told myself, that's their bag. And I actually learned that in being bullied, humor was the best thing. People would be like, oh, man, you're short and ugly. I'd be like, yeah, I am. Probably the ugliest guy you've ever met. Probably the shortest, too. Terrible. And they couldn't do anything with it, so it seemed to work. And it helped me because I was like, I don't need to embody this. Okay. I absolutely hate my past, feel my past is why I'm an angry drunk. If I had a better childhood, I'd be able to drink socially. Traumatized by my past for sure. 25 days sober today. Well, I would look at that, and one, congratulations on 25 days. That is a big step. The root of anger is usually sadness, right? And when we look at that, we're like, okay, I'm angry about something. What am I sad about? Maybe I'm sad that this guy stepped on my boundaries. Maybe I'm sad that this person did this. Maybe I'm sad that my childhood wasn't good, right? And that goes into, I feel like I deserve a better childhood. I feel like I should deserve better. I feel like this shouldn't have happened. And yes, I agree. Probably shouldn't have happened. But I have to look at it and say, well, there's people with worse. I didn't choose this. It's not personal to me. Therefore, I'm not going to own it. It is what it is. That was the childhood I had. And now I'm going to move on. And I used to be really stuck in it. Took me about a year and a half sober, of deliberately programming my mind to be different. And I found that that's what helped. I listened to tapes. I listened to talks every single day. And I was like, I'm going to change the way I think, because the way that I think right now isn't working. Right? It didn't work. My best thinking got me drunk. So I need something better, and something outside myself. Okay. I only think about my past to keep me from not drinking. That's great. I do that too. I'm like, wow, that's what's going to happen if I keep drinking. Okay. My mother is also extremely religious Christian too, and was a heavy abuser. Seems to often go hand in hand. Weird. Well, I think it does go hand in hand, and I think it's because we're putting labels and we're putting expectations on things that don't really need them. Like, living without expectations is a big thing. Like, now I go with my family, I'm like, I have no expectations. I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. I used to have you can't do this. You can't say that. Well, anyone can do whatever they want. The only thing we can do in life is ask cooperation. If we don't get it, we protect ourselves and we move on. We decide what we want to allow. Okay. Let's see. Sarah, good to see you. Thanks for the hearts. Veronica said, you're a beautiful soul. I'm sure she's talking about Caitlin. She is. She is amazing. Okay, let's see if there's any last-minute ones. Green tea. Yeah, green tea is good. How about the cigar? Is that on your mind to go to? Eventually. I only have like one a day, so it's not too bad. All right, so any last-minute questions? We'll take those, and then I got a lunch meeting to get to. Scaling says, how long do you think reprogramming takes? I'm seeing that it takes quite a long time. It depends on how deliberate you are. You got to be deliberate about it. You got to really take it to heart. And I would ask, how long did programming take? It took me 35 years to be programmed. So, 2 years to be deprogrammed wasn't too bad. 90 days, not too bad. So we got to look at that. Okay. My mom went to detox Saturday. Awesome. Okay. Scaling, you can change. I would start by changing your life philosophy first. Like, what's your philosophy on life? Is it that I was a victim and I deserved better? Is it that bad things always happen to me? Is it that I should have this or that guy should be punished? What is your life philosophy? Look at that and start there, because I find that everything stems from that. Now, my life philosophy didn't change overnight, but I think if you start to repeat things, you start to say, hey, this is what I believe. This is what I'm going to repeat. There's a really good book called Actualizations. I forget the name of the guy. It's around here somewhere. Very good book. I would look at that because he talks about what you repeat. In my sober letters, we talk about that as well. We have a list of things you can repeat to yourself. Sahil says, my life's philosophy is to kick ass. Well, be a good person. Do what you can do. But don't be too hard on yourself when things don't go exactly like you think. How old am I? I am 39. All right. For me, programming is learning a new way to live. Absolutely. It is a journey, not a destination. Very well said, Terry. All right. So any other last-minute ones? Let's see if I can sit down for a minute. See if that'll help my back. Wow, I'm big there. There we go. All right, cool. He says, wow, I look 30. Thank you. I do get that a lot. I do have some gray hairs, though, so don't let that fool you. All right, so we'll give 5 minutes for last-minute burning questions, and then we'll call it a day. I hope you guys liked this topic. Hope you guys liked Caitlin's talk, and we'll definitely be having her back. All right, cool. Sarah says, keep it simple. Absolutely. Keep life simple. Don't get too caught up in things. Don't get obsessed with phones and Facebooks and Instagrams. Just live the way you live and notice how those things affect you. All right, Scaly, let's see I think you got a question coming on. When will the sugar cravings stop? Really depends on what you do and how you moderate your body. For me, I still get sugar cravings sometimes, and I'm okay with it. I just take them in moderation. I like sugar. I stopped drinking, or I stopped eating candies. Yeah, 4 months sober, you're going to have sugar cravings, and just be okay with it. I'd just be like, whatever. I drank how many calories of sugar before, and now it's gone. Naturally, my body's going to crave it. Also, remember that a craving only lasts about 15 minutes, right? So if I sit here and I'm like, man, I feel like sugar right now. If I wait 15 minutes, it'll probably go away. Have a glass of water or something like that. But yeah, congrats on the 4 months. That's awesome. And I think that's the first time you've been here. So it's good to see you here. Hope to see you every Thursday. Kane, off the booze for 3 weeks. When I get cravings, I have some treats, pizza, chocolate, etc. Not the healthiest, but better than a 15 beer blackout. So that's what I told myself. Right? This bag of Skittles is better than booze. Okay, Sahil says, I have a theory. I am sober, but every 3 months I party once. The fact that I can't do something makes me crave it even more. True. Like, we always want what we can't have. Now, some people can go party every 3 months. I myself cannot. I know that when I drink and I like it, and I like the way that it makes me not think about things. So I don't want to mess with it. Right? I'm like, why would I mess with it? I don't want to end up where I was. Right? Last time I drank, I ended up in a loony bin. Like, I don't want that. Not at the expense of partying. And I also found that the reason I want to drink is because society wants me to drink. Not because I actually like it. Right? I mean, it does some things, but it's really way more bad than good. So the reason I want it is because society's telling me I want it. So now once I learned that, I was like, screw this. I don't need it. Like, really? Over what? You know, and by the way, it's a hell of a lot more fun to party sober. Like, it's way more fun. I used to go to dance clubs at my marketing meetings, and now when I go and I'm sober, I'm like, I have way more fun, and I don't fall asleep at the end of the night. You know, I'm not, like, being an idiot. Like, I can have way more fun. So the illusion that drinking is this big fun thing is not. Like, you guys are here because drinking is not fun. You're here because it's like, wow, this is an addiction. This sucks. I don't want it anymore. So hopefully that helps someone. I know it helps me. All right, any last minute questions? Let us know. All right, Josh says, yes, I have a great psychiatrist. Yes, alcoholics are OCD, ADD, or something. Remember, alcohol causes depression and anxiety. Absolutely true. Alcohol causes it. It makes it worse. Okay, J.A. says 8 months and 14 days sober. Awesome. Sahil says, true, sir, true. A friend of mine quit drinking after seeing your videos. Awesome. We got great stories. I absolutely love doing this. If you guys do want to support the work we're doing, go to talksober.com. Click on the support tab or whatever it says. There's a big button on the bottom. We give you a bunch of DVDs and MP3s and stuff. But you can help what we're doing here. Okay. Yeah, a lot of people start to self-medicate. I did. Not a great medicine. I find that it's better to just live life. Just be. Right? Because self-medicating is the idea that your feelings are terrible and you need to get rid of them. And they're not. If I have bad feelings, I have bad feelings for a reason. You know, I just got to live with that and be like, okay, I'm good. We're going to be all right. So, I think that is about it for today. Thanks for joining. Stay sober. Subscribe. If you can support the channel, go for it. And go from there. Millennium says, I'm here because booze and drugs made me a monster. It made me a person I didn't recognize, a person you wouldn't recognize. So you got to really, really focus. All right, Andor says 65 days. Awesome. All right, guys, so thank you. Subscribe here at Talk Sober. We just hit 10,000 subscribers, which is cool. Really, I'm, like, humbled that you guys like this stuff. I'm humbled that you guys like this and that people are staying sober. And I'm grateful to have you guys. But for right now, I got to go meet someone for lunch. So thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next week.